All right, folks, and without any further ado, let's go to, I'm very happy to say, Nigel Evans. He's the current Deputy Speaker of the House of Parliament in Great Britain. And Mr. Evans, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Good afternoon.
Your thoughts on the life and death of Margret Thatcher?
Hugely saddened by today's news. I heard it about just after lunchtime in the United Kingdom. And quite frankly, my day has just been transformed since then in responding to media requests about my thoughts about the death of Margaret. And she was the most stupendous Prime Minister that I have ever seen. David Cameron himself says that she'll go down as the greatest peacetime Prime Minister of the 20th century, and that is without a doubt. She came into power in 1979 at a time when the last Labour government had industrial disputes throughout the whole of the winter, leaving the dead unburied and rubbish piled high on the streets. The United Kingdom was seen as the sick man of the European Union and indeed of Europe. And Margaret came in and basically transformed all of that, making Britain one of the strongest countries in the world, and indeed put the great back in Britain. And she has been called a Great Britain herself today. That's exactly what she is. She will leave her mark on Britain for decades to come, and people will speak about her in the same way that they speak about Winston Churchill in the way that he saved Britain during wartime. She certainly saved us economically through peacetime, and people will talk about her for centuries to come.
Well, it's interesting you say that about how people will speak of her. And, of course, I want to ask you more about her legacy, what it means to the Conservative Party in England today, her legacy as far as that goes, and her relationship with Ronald Reagan, because if you listen to her, she was the British female version of Ronald Reagan in so many respects. But I do want to ask you about some of the shameful cheering that has come from the left, both in your country and in our country and in the media in both countries. Of course, you expect it from George Galloway, who tweeted, "Tramp the dirt down." You have a Facebook campaign, the witch is dead. And here on MSNBC in New York, out of New York, you had Martin Bashir. And if we have that cut, it's the final cut, I believe. I just want you to hear some of this. And there's also a bunch of comments on Huffington Post. She and Reagan both deserved the brain disorders that God afflicted them with. I mean, vicious, horrific kind of things that we saw when Dick Cheney had his heart ailment and when other people on the right have suffered illnesses. Tony Snow, the former press secretary to George Bush. But listen to Martin Bashir.
Well, I think Thatcher's career can be divided between a fairly effective role on the foreign policy end of things, but an incredibly divisive one domestically. In 1982, when Argentina planted a flag on the Falkland Islands, she set troops 8,000 miles in the distance. The military conflict was won, and she won a landslide election following that. But at the same time as that was going on, she was breaking unions, particularly with regard to the mining unions, which resulted in some incredibly violent domestic strife and protest. But at the end of the day, I think it wasn't just the rhetoric. Remember also that in the 1980s, she unleashed some of the worst race riots because of the excessively over-heavy policing that she encouraged in urban communities, one of which I grew up in, that resulted in this. So there was real domestic strife going on at the same time as you're rightly critiquing that she was doing some very, very positive things elsewhere.
Okay, so overall, I mean, Bashir wasn't as horrible as I thought it was going to be, but bad enough. But the viciousness from the left, sir.
No, well, I agree with what you've just said. Yeah, some people who seem to glory in the fact that she's no longer with us, I think that says a lot more about them than it ever says about Margaret Thatcher. And some of these people, including Martin Bashir, I mean, people will say, well, who the heck is he? Quite frankly, as I say, they'll be speaking about Margaret Thatcher and her achievements in a century to come and centuries to come. And I think that really does speak volumes. As far as Martin Bashir saying that she was divisive. Well, yes, she certainly was to some quarters, and quite rightly so. Yes, she was a controversial figure. She didn't court popularity. She courted what was right. And that's why we needed the changes in the transformation of the power balance between the trade unions and the people, as I would refer to call that particular battle, not between the trade unions and the government. It was between the trade unions and the people. And the trade unions had the power in those days prior to Margret Thatcher coming in. That has now been completely transformed. Yes, it wasn't popular with those who rather liked the trade unions having the power, but the vast majority of us rather enjoy the fact that we don't now still face the constant daily strikes that we used to under the previous Labour government, and indeed even prior to that, even under Edward Heath. She did things like selling off council homes so that for over 1 million people they had the opportunity to free themselves from the shackle of rented homes from the local authority in order to buy them. And you know, when you go down a street of council houses, you knew the ones that had been bought and those that hadn't, because the ones who had bought their houses then started to invest money into them, ensuring that they had new windows, a new door, perhaps some cladding put on it. The garden was done. You knew full well which ones had been bought and which ones had not been. And then there was the transformation of the old state-owned industries, monolithic, slow companies that were bleeding the taxpayer dry because they all had to be subsidised and supported. And even looking at the days, you laugh now about British Telecom, which was state-owned. You had to wait months to have your telephone installed, and of course, the colour of the phone was black. That was the choice. I mean, that's all gone. And not only were they privatised, but it did allow the opportunity for millions of people to own shares in companies for the first time. She made that a reality for a lot of people who'd never owned shares before. And then, of course, there's the Falklands War. Martin Bashir mentioned that. Yes, absolutely. She sent troops 8,000 miles down to liberate the Falkland Islands away from the Argentinian invasion in order that the people of the Falklands could decide to remain British. That's what they wanted. They just had a referendum only this year with an overwhelming majority saying that they wished to remain British. Margaret Thatcher had the guts to do that. Quite frankly, that's why I believe that we're probably only scratching at the surface as well of the things that she achieved during that particular time. It's been said that she dragged the political centre away from where it was. And that is absolutely true too. President Barack Obama has talked about her being a champion of freedom and liberty. And she did that working with Ronald Reagan against the Soviet bloc and indeed against the Argentinians as well. So Margaret Thatcher's legacy is one that I believe that will be touched by many people, millions of people who in the future who weren't around to ever experience it. My only regret is I was elected in 1992. I fought an election in 1987 alongside Margaret Thatcher, but sadly I didn't win that one. And I came in 92, sadly, after she had departed the House of Commons to go to the House of Lords. And I just wish that I'd been in the House at that time to just sit there behind her when she was dominating the House of Commons, as we've seen footage of it all day today on the British news. I'm sure you've had the same.
Oh, absolutely. Her back and forth on socialism was amazing. We're talking to Nigel Evans, the current Deputy Speaker of the British Parliament, here on the Steve Malzberg Show. One more for you. So as you talk about how history is going to judge and measure her achievements, and I couldn't agree more with you. But from a strictly political sense within your own country, and talking about the Conservative Party, her lasting legacy and effects on British politics within your own party, sir.
Yeah, well, on our own party, and I'm proud to call myself a Thatcherite too. Her legacy is Thatcherism. And if you look at other prime ministers we've had before and after, very few have lent their names to a philosophy which actually strikes at the very heart of why I'm in politics to begin with, which is a small state, that you ensure that people themselves if they're working, keep the vast majority of their own money, that people have the freedom to choose where they send their youngsters to school, that they have the freedom to live their lives without the despoliation by daily strikes by industrialized unions who basically are ruling the roost of this country, which used to be the case. Individual responsibility and caring for others as well. This is something that Margret Thatcher desperately believed in. So her legacy will be one of, summed up in one word, which is belief. She actually believed in something. She believed in herself too, which was vitally important. I remember once sitting with her. There were several of us just newly elected, and we had her round for dinner, and we were all talking about various things that she had done. And you know, when I walked into the room, I thought, oh, she's aged a bit. By the end of the evening, because of the enthusiasm and energy of the conversations we were all having, she looked 15 years younger. And one of my colleagues said to her, Margaret, if you had your time over again, what would you have done differently? And she sort of reflected on this for a second or two and then said, well, actually, I thought I did rather well first time round.
Great story. Very great story. Nigel Evans, thank you so much, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for joining us. I really appreciate it, sir.
Pleasure. I really enjoyed talking with you. And as ever, America and Britain join together in commemorating a great lady.
Absolutely. Well said. Thank you, sir.